Ah, this beautiful small town feel. I could live out here in a nice farm, be away from society, small town. Of course, then I'd have to end up with a 56K internet modem connection. Yeah, and second thought, I think I'll pass. Welcome ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho and this is Mob Reviews, and today we're going to be taking a look at Ether 1. This was created by White Paper Games, available for PC. It is a adventure walking simulator, some would call it. Exploration, puzzle solving game. How well does it handle? And how in depth are the puzzles and the overall story and atmosphere of the game? And we will find out by beginning with the options menu. Now in the audio you do have everything split up on different sliders, which is definitely nice as the music helps propel an atmosphere through the world. The only negative side to the music, although it's done very well, is the fact that it is not continuous throughout the entire gameplay of the game. There are some dead zones where it leaves off and you have to wander about in silence. The audio and voice acting is done very well, and I'll let you hear that once we start talking about story. But overall, the atmosphere, due to the sounds, the voice, and the music, really ties well together. As you can see some other options, and when we go into video, you do have a large berth of screen resolutions, which is definitely nice, and your basic VSync and AA. The graphical detail is like a hand-painted picture, rather than anything really amazingly high-tech. The game does get by for what it has, and I haven't had any issues in the graphical sense of the game. It has been running at 60 frames per second with no tearing, clipping, or crashing of any sort. And as you can see, it is nice that it even has a FOV slider, which is not something that you may expect. For this style of game to really have the depth of the choices they do in the options menu is definitely nice, even down to rebindable keys. They've really gone the extra mile, and the options menu definitely represents a lot of hard work and effort. We'll begin our topic of this game by talking about the story of the game. The story is not anything uncommon as we've seen in these styles of genre. You play as a restorer going into a mind of a person with dementia. The game does start off a little slow and it's an adventure and you're figuring out what's going on in your place and everything, but the story does a very good job of actually relaying to you what is going on. There are many times while you're walking through that you'll understand and hear either your handler from the control room or the voice of the mind actually talking to you as you're exploring this world. You don't feel as if you're left alone to this world. Now, it doesn't have the same in-depth grip that something like the Stanley Parable. You don't have a continuation of a narration leading you through the game. It's done in a third-person perspective. The voices are not compound to you, you are your own entity. And it does handle, though, very well in telling you the story and tale. But it does so in a different manner. You don't feel like you're alone, but you do feel that you are separate and have a different viewpoint of what's going on. The effects of what's happening here do not directly affect you. Whether the person with dementia whose mind you're in dies or lives, whether the program succeeds or fails, you really have no tie to that. The story may progress well and allow you to feel like you're involved, absolutely. But because there's really no immediate threat or personalization of a story tying directly to you, it does take it more of a third-person perspective. This was a brazen plan for them to do, and while the topic subject is dementia and it may be beneficial, insightful, or helpful for those dealing with that problem, for most people I feel the story will become something that is either enjoyed as they go along with it, but they don't connect to a really tangible level. You're not going to walk away with a real feeling of, wow, that was special. The voice acting done in the game though is really on par, and as I said, as you're walking through you do hear plenty of interaction, as the whole point of the story is to find these ribbons. Ribbons correlate into memories, and when you pick these memories up you get a little further into the story, progressing forward into understanding not only the patient but also your handler and the situation, which is done very well. And I'll let you hear it for yourself now.
There it is. Our readings, they're showing that this is what's causing the symptoms of dementia in our patient. Or at least it's part of what's causing it. Destroy it any way you can. Once the task is done, I'll be able to extract you from the memory and place you in another. Say, not again! It's resisting! Whatever you do, don't listen to it!
That is true! You need to escape!
It's trying to stay attached to the mind in any way it can.
She doesn't want anyone to!
You can't trust it! Hit the switch, Restorer! Destroy it and we can access further parts.
What have you done, you stupid little rat? You've ruined everything. Oh God, no.
Which brings us to level design. The level design of the world is fairly large. It's not something that you're going to potentially get lost in because it's overly too large, but it is thick. It does have weight or substantial size to it. There's plenty of areas to explore, and that's where the game tries to coax upon you. Yes, there are memories that you need to find and to gather those memories in order to go forward, but it's the exploration and the understanding that really ties into the story quite well, as visually the game and the level design does have the scene that it's going for, whether it be a mill, a riverbank, a small town, a pub, whatever the situation at hand. They really have the aesthetic down right. You can get a sense of what it would be like in real life, or what it was like for the people who were working there at that point in time when it was active. The level design has multi-layers upon it, whether the houses, the shops, basements, alleyways, streams. The different aspects of these designs are done very well. You don't feel like it's a repetitiveness. There's not just a linear path through the story like, hey, I walked through one shop and then through one house and then I made it to the next zone. It has weight and it has substantial atmosphere to it, and that's what really matters. Depending on your own personal view take of your own history, you may even feel reminiscence of some areas due to how well the hand-painted style that they were going for really kicks off. It does have a nice feeling, or a warm feeling, or an eerie feeling at times, depending on where you're coming from. The exploration in the game is probably its biggest selling point. You feel as you're going through that everything you're seeing is something new, and it's not a continuation of just a reusage of old buildings or maps. It has its own life, which unfortunately is sort of distraught by the puzzles in the game. There are a bountiful amount of puzzles within the game, which for the most part are optional. Think of them as extra credit. You fill them out and you can understand more lore, feel more accomplished, but they're not mandatory, and that's nice, that it doesn't have a huge parade of puzzles that are mandatory on you. And why that's nice in this case is because the puzzles are very repetitive. The puzzles are probably the weakest selling point, unfortunately, of this game. They are more like scavenger quests, or read a timestamp on a wall and remember that timestamp because you'll need to punch in those numbers somewhere else in the building. It's not anything that is clever. You're not really needed to think, just remember. You're not having to try to understand a riddle or de-encrypt some sort of combination to get through an area or find a mystery. It just falls down to a simple, hey, I see this, it looks important, I'll either store it at the base, or I'll write it down, and it may or may not come in handy later. Puzzles in a game can start out fair, and whether you enjoy the game and you're completionist or not will depend on how many of them you do, but they do get very repetitive very fast. There wasn't all that much effort, I feel, put into diversity when it comes to finding out extra lore or solving these separate puzzle areas, which is really unfortunate. Because there's a lack of diversity, the game becomes stagnant. While you may understand the story and you may progress here and there and be like, okay, this is interesting so far, the lack of the diversity in the puzzles really puts a cramp on gameplay. How much depends on the player themselves. So at the end of the day, you have a story which gets by on its own. Yeah, it's not going to drag you in perhaps, and really make it a personal subject matter unless you have personal real life experience with dementia or dealing with somebody with some sort of mental health disability or whatnot. The story distances itself slightly a bit too far, I feel, from a player. Now, not everybody may feel that way, but the deliberation of how a story is given, the voice acting is done actually pretty well. And so, while it may not enwrap you into a sense of ambrosia, it still tells a decent story. This is propelled by an excellent level design and an exploration which really makes you want to explore and feel like you're exploring new areas. Unfortunately, that's cut short by the puzzles which get very repetitive very fast. So it comes down to, am I able to recommend this game? And I would say yes. But you have to really like this genre. You have to really enjoy the walking and exploration and understanding a story as you progress. You will need to work for what you gain within this game, but the work falls more to a remembrance rather than a solving or detective aspect. If you don't play these genres very often, then I would recommend to stay away from this. But if you love this type of genre, these types of games where you explore, the story is your main goal, then perhaps so. I can see the game for what it is, and the beautiful parts that it does have, and the negative parts it does have. Unfortunately, I did not personally enjoy the game, but as I said in my recommendation, it does come down to how you feel and what genres you really enjoy. I hope this has been helpful, for I've been SocioPsycho of Mob Reviews, and I'll see you next time.